Community in mourning. People of faith are reaching out following Saturday's massacre at a synagogue as the president grieves with Pittsburgh. Our White House correspondent is there. Midterm messages. In the final days before next week's crucial elections, how leaders of the Democrat and Republican parties are staying busy and what they're saying. Heading to the southern border, more than 5,000 troops are being deployed to stop migrants from entering the U.S. We're at the Pentagon. And seen in a new light, why a masterpiece at St. Peter's Basilica looks a little brighter today. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, October 30th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Trump and the First Lady are joining mourners tonight in Pittsburgh, 3 days after a gunman killed 11 people Saturday at the Tree of Life synagogue. It is the worst anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history. The first funerals for 3 of the victims happened today. And yet some Jewish leaders and the Democrat mayor of Pittsburgh asked the president not to come.
Our focus as a city will be on the families and the outreach that they'll need this week and the support that they'll need to get through it. Once we get past that, then I think there's the opportunity for presidential visits.
The rabbi at the Tree of Life has said the president is always welcome. We go to White House correspondent Mark Irons, who is outside Tree of Life Synagogue, where the community is trying to heal. Good evening, Mark.
The president is here today at the synagogue. We've been speaking to people all day in this neighborhood. They aren't too focused on his trip, though. They are talking about how it's time to put aside differences over politics, over religion. And that's why the tragedy here was such a shock, because people in this community of different faiths are united.
You never think that something like this is going to come to your hometown.
Glenn Hall lives 2 blocks from Tree of Life. Today, he pays his respects at the makeshift memorial outside the synagogue.
These neighbors are all connected.
Less than a mile away, I met Father Thomas Burke outside St. Bede Catholic Church. Father Burke is a police department chaplain. He says 4 officers wounded during the synagogue massacre will make it through. And now people in this neighborhood are relying on one another.
Our communities are coming together, regardless if you're Catholic, Jewish, Protestant, or even a non-believer. Hopefully this can wake up and say we're all human beings.
St. Bede parishioner Kay Boyle is shocked at the hate that filled Tree of Life. She says the Jewish men and women within this tight-knit community are her neighbors, friends.
Watching a tragedy occur, it's never been in our neighborhood before.
It was personal, like this was an attack on Jews.
And that's why Jeff Parnas came down from New York. His Jewish congregation helped design these stars painted with messages of hope.
You respond to acts of hate with acts of kindness.
Jeff says he experienced anti-Semitism as a kid.
So to experience that level of hate, you grow up with that and you're aware of it, but you strive to do things to show we love this country, we love our neighbors. It doesn't matter what your religion or faith or background is.
And Catholic Sandy Levy says the horrific tragedy that happened inside a place of worship shouldn't break apart faith communities.
We can't live in fear. We really have to just keep praying and asking for God's protection over these worship sites.
Faith communities are sticking together here. Another big example, the Muslim community here in Pittsburgh raised over $70,000 for victims and their families. Lauren?
Mark, those funerals were today. What can you tell us about David and Cecil Rosenthal and Dr. Jerry Rabinowitz, who were laid to rest today?
That's right, Lauren. The Rosenthal brothers were intellectually disabled brothers. They were described as inseparable, beautiful souls. And as for Dr. Rabinowitz, I spoke with a Catholic nurse who worked with him at a hospital here. She was too emotional to speak with us on camera, but she told me he was a great man.
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. Defense Secretary James Mattis confirms more than 5,000 troops are on their way to the southern border and will be there by the weekend. The decision is in response to thousands of Central American migrants moving north through Mexico, headed to the U.S. border. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby has more from the Pentagon. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Defense officials say the 5,200 troops will be at the southern border by the end of the week. They insist it's not a political decision, but it comes just a week before the midterm elections, and immigration is still a hot-button issue. A group of several hundred Central American migrants hoping to reach U.S. soil, wading the river from Guatemala into Mexico. They're trying to catch up with several thousand still inching north, despite efforts from Mexican authorities to keep them from crossing. The Defense Department says its goal is to secure the southern border, deterring the migrants from trying to cross between entry points.
In a macro sense, our concept of operations is to flow in our military assets with a priority to build up southern Texas, and then Arizona, and then California.
The Pentagon will also send medical units, military police units, and strategic airlift capabilities, including 4 large transport aircraft and helicopters equipped with sensors to operate at night.
I think the President has made it clear that border security is national security. That is the direction we've given. That's the direction that we're marching to.
The White House has been keeping voters focused on the migrant caravan in the lead up to the midterm elections. The Vice President is committed to the issue. He spoke last night at a rally in Michigan.
Our message to people in the caravan is simple. Turn around. You will not be allowed to come into the United States of America illegally.
Catholic and other faith-based groups are calling on Americans to remember the most vulnerable. Young hunter and children and the elderly fleeing violence in their homeland are getting medical help in Mexico. Many, like this young mother and her son, have developed coughs and fevers after being exposed to heat, rain, and the cold. Now, some Catholic groups like the Franciscan Action Network say it's our moral duty to welcome and to protect the asylum seekers. The issue continues to spark arguments among American Catholics many of whom support strong borders and welcoming the stranger. Lauren?
Wyatt, will the president end birthright citizenship? What has he said on that?
Well, Lauren, reportedly this topic has come up various times within the administration over the last year. The president has said in an upcoming documentary to air that he wants to end the birthright citizenship for babies of non-U.S. citizens, as well as immigrants not authorized to be in the U.S. Now, most scholars believe that's a long shot to actually happen, especially when you think of the fact that it may require a constitutional amendment to do so. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the Pentagon. Joining me now for more analysis is Vince Cognialese, editorial director at the Daily Caller and host of Mornings on the Mall on WMAL Radio. Vince, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Lauren.
President Trump said he can make this change by executive order. Is this something we're likely to see, or likely to see without legal challenges?
Well, he says that it will happen, and it will happen by executive order, which means that we're probably headed for a test in the courts and ultimately potentially in the Supreme Court. What's different about this case is that the illegal immigration and the idea that an illegal immigrant's child could become a citizen of the United States by birthright, that question's never been tested in the Supreme Court. The question of legal immigrants having children in the U.S. becoming citizens, that was tested in 1898. So he could be the president that introduces this topic to the court and forces them to come up with a decision on it.
Vice President Pence responded to critics of the proposal today, dismissing the notion that this is another attempt to rally Republican support ahead of next week's midterms. What do you make of the timing?
Well, it's clear, thanks to what we have data from the Border Patrol, that last month was a record for the number of families who were actually illegally crossing the border. So there's a lot of focus paid on the caravan and the size of it, but the truth is thousands of people are crossing into our country illegally every month with or without caravans of any specific size. So illegal immigration, clearly an issue. The idea here, though, for the Vice President and for the President of the United States is that tackling this issue now, look, voters deserve a chance to ratify whether or not they want this administration to continue its policy at pace. It's totally reasonable for them to vote on that subject when they go to the polls election day.
I'd like to turn to the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh. What are your thoughts on the president's visit there today? As some say, he was exploiting tragedy for political gain. There's a group of Jewish leaders who other people have also said are doing the exact same thing by urging him not to come. Is our country so politically divided that anything the president does is going to be bad?
Well, unquestionably. I mean, in the sense that President Trump has a unique ability to provoke hysteria in his critics, no matter what tenor he takes. In this particular case, and we saw it last week as well with these package bombs being sent around the country, the president chose to rise to the occasion and to have a tone of unity, condemning these attacks and saying we need to be unified as Americans. His critics should temper their criticism in the face of him doing the very thing that they call him to do, which is to be a unifier. And here he is attempting to do it, and they're attacking him for it anyway. They should be careful not to be divisive in the wake of all of this when the obvious call is to unify.
Vince Colognese, editorial director at the Daily Caller, host of Mornings on the Mall on WMAL Radio.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you. A whistleblower says she went public about the Diocese of Buffalo because its response to clergy abuse was incomplete. Siobhan O'Connor is a former executive assistant to Bishop Richard Malone. She says she leaked documents to the media after the diocese published an incomplete list of priests accused of misconduct. Her story was featured last Sunday on 60 Minutes. A former papal diplomat to the U.S. has confirmed to EWTN News Nightly that rumors regarding former Cardinal Theodore McCarrick's sexual misconduct were already known in the 1990s. Retired Cardinal Agostino Cognialese served as Vatican ambassador to the United States under Pope St. John Paul II from 1990 to 1998. He says that in the run-up to JP2's U.S. visit in 1995, he heard rumors of McCarrick's inappropriate behavior with seminarians in the Newark Archdiocese. Vatican correspondent Juliet Lindley joins us from Rome. Juliet, what did the former Vatican ambassador or nuncio hear in 1994, and did he investigate the McCarrick rumors?
Lauren, Cardinal Cognialese says that in '94, shortly before John Paul II's U.S. visit, a lady phoned him to warn that if the Pope went ahead with a planned visit to Newark, New Jersey, there might be a media firestorm because of rumors circulating about McCarrick's sexual misconduct with seminarians. Now, Cognialese is now 92 years old. He immediately reached out then to then Archbishop of New York, Cardinal John O'Connor, who reportedly carried out an inquiry but apparently did not find anything to substantiate the rumors. Cognialese told me O'Connor said to him there was, quote, no obstacle to the Pope's visit to New Jersey, and he said he considered O'Connor, who passed away in the year 2000, to be a competent person, Lauren.
So, Juliet, St. John Paul II's trip went ahead as planned in 1995. There was no media firestorm, despite what we know now about McCarrick's alleged misconduct. So did Cognialese ever speak to McCarrick about the rumors?
Lauren, Cognialese told CNS that he never broached the subject of the rumors with McCarrick, despite meeting him frequently during his tenure. But Cognialese, who is a former diplomat, finally spoke about it with Cardinal Mark Wuerl, the head of the Congregation of Bishops, earlier this month, just one day after Wuerl released an open letter responding to allegations by another former Vatican ambassador to the U.S., Carlo Vigano. And that letter had been accusing Pope Francis of covering up McCarrick's misconduct. Now, just to clarify, Lauren, Vigano did not name Cognialese in any of his accusations.
So this is all about accusations about McCarrick. Where is McCarrick now? And what are critics saying about how he has been treated since the news broke of his misconduct?
Lauren, in July, Pope Francis removed McCarrick as a cardinal after a U.S. church investigation determined an accusation he molested a teenage altar boy was credible. But critics say not enough has been done in terms of sanctioning the former cardinal. In late September, the Archdiocese of Washington announced that McCarrick was moving to a friary in Victoria, Kansas. And there was an uproar in the community when that happened, since the friary is located not far from a school.
And the critics now of this whole incident are waiting for a report, a church investigation on the matter. Juliet Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Spain says the Vatican will help decide where to rebury the remains of late dictator Francisco Franco. Franco is being exhumed from a mausoleum. His relatives want him to be buried in Madrid's Catholic cathedral, but the Vatican says it helps authorities find a different location. Protesters last week said having the general's remains in the city would make it a pilgrimage site for extreme groups and others nostalgic for the general's authoritarian rule. A Catholic bishop says the war in Yemen needs a ceasefire, not the world's silence. Bishop Paul Hinder of Southern Arabia also says Christians and Muslims together are praying for peace in the region. More than 6,000 civilians have been killed in the Arabian country's 3-year conflict. Turkey's president says the investigation into the death of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi needs to be finished quickly. The writer was seen last month entering Saudi Arabia's consulate in Istanbul. Turkey has requested the extradition of 18 suspects currently being detained by the kingdom. Turkish President Recep Erdogan says he's not interested in excuses. He wants to solve the mystery of Khashoggi's death. 5 nuns were kidnapped last week in southern Nigeria. Gunmen attacked the vehicle the sisters were traveling in, leaving 2 other nuns injured. Violence against Christians has increased in recent years. 5 priests have also been kidnapped in the country this year alone. There is a lot more in the show tonight. Coming up, how Democrat and Republican leaders are staying busy leading to next week's midterm elections, and a rare appearance in Washington for Cardinal Wuerl. We'll tell you why. We're counting down. Just 1 week left until Election Day. The ballots voters cast will decide who controls the House and Senate and ultimately the future of our country. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi is following key campaigners as they make a last pitch to win votes. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. A lot hangs in the balance. The GOP holds a 51-49 Senate majority. A few big issues already came down to a tie in this chamber, allowing states to defund Planned Parenthood and the nomination of Sam Brownback to be the ambassador at large for international religious freedom. Tonight, campaigners and chiefs rush to get out the vote.
Former Vice President Joe Biden urges change.
I am sick and tired of this administration. I'm sick and tired of what's going on. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I hope you are too.
But the current vice president says their opponents are just complaining.
The Democrats really have no agenda except resistance, no agenda except extraction, and our agenda is growth, it's jobs, it's security, it's principled men and women on our courts at every level.
Pence pitches those issues as he rallies for votes. EWTN's national poll finds the #1 issue for Catholics going to Mass each week: economy and jobs. Issues tackled by the Democrats' campaigner-in-chief.
So when folks talk right now about, oh, the economy's doing so well, where do you think that started? Come on, tell the truth.
But Pence says voters are connecting with the message of Republicans.
We understand what the historical tides are, but I got to tell you, I feel like that blue wave's going to hit a red wall come next Tuesday.
Only time will tell.
Now, the Cook Political Report ranks more than 40 House races as toss-ups and says here in the Senate there are 9 toss-ups. Right here on EWTN News Nightly, we're excited to be hitting the campaign trail. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and on Twitter and connect with our Catholic in America coverage. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. Former Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy says his hardest court decisions were those contrary to his Catholic beliefs, but required because of his civic duty. The San Francisco Chronicle says he made the comments at Stanford's law school. Kennedy was the author of the court's gay rights rulings, including the 2015 decision to legalize same-sex marriage. Cardinal Donald Wuerl celebrated the 9th annual White Mass Sunday in Washington, D.C. The service honors the gifts of those with disabilities. Attendees are asked to wear white as a symbol of baptism into Christ's body. The Vatican earlier this month accepted Cardinal Wuerl's resignation as the head of the Archdiocese of Washington. He had been under fire for his handling of clergy abuse allegations. There is plenty more on our newscast tonight. Up next, how technology is helping to spread the good news from the Bible. And the Vatican has a bright idea about one of its masterpieces. The percent of Americans using technology to read the Bible is on the rise. 55% of those surveyed by a Christian polling firm called the Barna Group say they search for Bible content on their smartphones. 42% say they use a Bible app on their phones. Joining me now by Skype from Fort Smith, Arkansas, is Jacqueline Burke-Pyle, assistant editor at Church Pop, part of the EWTN network. Jacqueline, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lauren.
89% of people surveyed say, hey, I want my Bible in print. But the use of technology seems to be growing pretty steadily. Why do you think digital formats like the Bible tab on the EWTN app are expanding the Bible's reach around the world?
Well, first of all, I think the primary reason is it's so convenient. I myself use the internet most of the time for my Bible reading, and a lot of times it's easy just to, even when I'm just looking up a Bible verse on the internet, I can just type in whatever I want and I can plug it into an article I'm writing. Or, even when we're studying or when we're referencing anything, it's really easy just to look it up. And EWTN also has a feature where you can just type in something and find it.
I use the app on my phone. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I love to just be able to say New Testament, Old Testament, Ephesians, and click on each one of the ones. Tell me how it engages people. For me, the beauty of it is that if I am out and about, if I'm waiting, I have it right there, and I'm obviously not carrying around a big Bible.
Right. It's like I said, it's convenience because I don't normally bring, like when I'm going to adoration, I don't normally bring my phone. I normally bring my phone. I bring like maybe a couple of books, but I don't lug around my Bible everywhere I go. A lot of times, I'll read my Bible in bed before I go to sleep or something like that. And then if I'm on the go, my phone is just right there. I can pick it up and I can go.
Sure. So other than convenience, what do you think? People I have talked to who I tell that I do this, they worry that thoughtful and careful study of the Word will be diminished by these fast-paced apps.
And that can be a problem too, because personally, that actually happens to me. I get distracted. I'm like, oh, I got a notification, and now I want to look at it because my phone just went off.
Right, your Instagram just went off, right?
Yeah, and it's really tempting, and I think it's the way for the enemy to keep us distracted away from the Bible or God's word or prayer. And so I think we can also, there's on the iPhone, they just released a new thing where you can turn off your notifications during certain times of the day. And I think maybe eliminating those distractions, or even praying to the Holy Spirit, say, Holy Spirit, just please help me to not be distracted. Because yeah, it can be a problem, and it can diminish your prayer life if you're not careful.
Right. I think that there are, pluses and minuses to both, but I think the younger generation, this would serve very well since they're on their phone 24/7 anyway. Jacqueline Burke-Pyle, thank you so much for joining us, assistant editor at Church Pop. Finally tonight, one of St. Peter's Basilica's most famous works of art is seen in a new light. The Vatican has installed new lighting to better show the Pietà by Italian Renaissance artist Michelangelo. Completed in 1499, the Pietà shows the young face of Mary holding the dead body of Christ after his crucifixion. These new LED lights allow visitors to really see the marble sculpture from different angles. Look at that. Look at the difference. The picture that I have from when I was in Rome last month was the one on the left. I can't imagine being able to see it so clearly. Now, I guess that just means I have to go back to Rome. Okay, that's it. That's all I have to do. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.